My name's Mick Napier. It's another Scottish-Palestine Solidarity broadcast. And today I'd like Abdulrahman Abu Nahel from Gaza, but currently in Istanbul, to share his thoughts with you. Abdulrahman is a community activist in Gaza, and he's the local representative of the Palestine National BDS committee. Welcome, Abdulrahman.
Welcome, Mick. Welcome, everybody.
I think you had some problems getting out of Gaza, unsurprisingly, of course. But perhaps before we talk about the general situation and then move on to what people can do, perhaps you could tell us why you're in Istanbul.
Well, thank you, Mick, and thanks for the Scottish campaign, and thanks for everybody watching us. Yeah, now, as everybody knows, Gaza has been under full Israeli siege for over 12 years, and this is a crime against the humanity, and it took me years to leave Gaza, and even 2 months to leave after getting visa due to the daily closure of Rafah crossing with Egypt and all the trouble where people, sick people losing their lives and their health getting worse as my health got worse before being able to leave, and also facing trouble.
Can you tell people what the health issue was? And you didn't want to go to Istanbul, that wasn't your target, but maybe you can tell people what the health issue was and what you tried to do.
Yeah, the health issue was getting medication for treatment of a specific disease called keratoconus, and which got worse since my early teenager years due to the Israeli blockade. I wasn't able to leave at time, and I left Oman and then now to Europe. And now Fortress Europe didn't give me the chance to stay in Spain to complete the medication, so I have to go to Istanbul because getting back to Gaza again and applying for a new visa, meaning losing the chance to get medication. People waiting for years and months to leave the Rafah crossing, or if they have the chance, which I can't get this chance due to my role in the BDS movement, if they left through air crossing with Israel, they might be jailed or they might be interrogated by Israeli intelligence security. So now waiting on the edge of Europe to be allowed in to get my medication in Spain. And this is, I think, this is sometimes maybe my colleagues and my people in Gaza and in Palestine are in worse situation than me. People with cancer are not able to leave, and they don't have medications in Gaza for this due to the Israeli.
Sure, but I think in your case, you got a 3-month visa, and then you were not allowed to leave for 2 months. Was this the decision of the Egyptians, or is it a decision of the Israelis that the Egyptians have to carry out?
Well, we don't know exactly, but it seems like this Egyptian policy goes alongside the Israeli policy, and the situation also in Sinai is not easy. It took me like 2 days to leave from Rafah to Cairo, which is only by car. It's like 8 hours, but now it took 2 to 3 days. So that's awful. And now this is better than last year. Last year the Rafah crossing was closed almost all days of the year. Now it's open, but with little procedure and later procedures and dehumanization of Palestinians at the crossing.
Okay, so you managed to get out, okay, many people cannot, Abdulrahman. Look, we know about a lot of people here know about the grim situation in Gaza. We know about the crimes against humanity, but there's recently been a report by the UN Human Rights Council, I think 10 days ago. It was published, and it was particularly hard-hitting. The investigators, to their great credit, have told the truth. They've said that the Israelis are killing children, disabled Palestinians and journalists, knowing that they're killing children and disabled people. Is there anything that you can add to that particular horror from your personal experience, Abdulrahman?
Well, yes, this report is very important when it concludes that these killings may constitute crimes, war crimes, or crimes against humanity. And this is not the first report against Israel. Goldstone report and other reports about the Israeli violations. It's not only how Israel deployed Israeli snipers every Friday along the fence with Gaza to kill children and people and journalists like Yasser Mortaja and paramedics like Razan al-Najjar, and more than almost 200 people. The whole siege in Gaza, as described by the Israeli historian Ilan Pape, is incremental genocide. And Richard Falk described it. In the beginning, it's a prelude to genocide. And I witnessed, alongside with my family and friends, 3 genocidal wars in 28, 29, 2011, and 2014, which lasted for
2008 and 2009, yeah?
Yes, 2008, 2009, the winter 2008, 2009, and November 2011, and the summer of 2014. And it was really crimes against the humanity and war crimes and genocide in Shijaiya and Beit Hanun, leveling civilian areas to earth, killing many people, and I lost a lot of people, and my family, my close family, sisters lost their homes in that war. But what is important about this, also to highlight about these reports, that Western governments are not doing their job. They are not cutting aid to Israel. They are not making any serious steps to stop these violations. Now we have seen when my people in Gaza demonstrated for like now the yearly anniversary of the Great March Return, and also people demonstrated in West Bank and in Sakhneen inside Israel, Al-Nasira and Al-Naqab. And it was clear how Israel deployed all its army along the fence with Gaza and trying to prevent the Palestinians from returning to their homes, which were their ethnically cleansed in 1948. The Western governments did nothing. And yesterday, 4 Palestinians, 3 of them are teens, were killed by Israeli snipers, and almost 500 people were injured by Israeli snipers, and they are protesting peacefully for their rights. And just to let people know how this coastal enclave is, it's almost 300 square kilometers, and it has more than 2 million Palestinians living in it. Almost 2/3 of them are refugees, and sons of refugees from villages and towns ethnically cleansed by Zionist Israeli militias in 1948.
Abdulrahman, the authors, the investigators of the UN report say that they have a lot of video evidence. They've made a very thorough investigation, and they've come up with the names of some of the killers and their commanders. But we see the images. We see individuals, sometimes young boys or women, being killed when they're clearly not a threat to anybody. But generally speaking, and I hate to discuss this in detail, but people should know, are these snipers generally working at quite a distance, a few hundred meters, more than a few hundred meters, or are they killing Palestinians up close?
What do you mean? I didn't.
Snipers sometimes kill people at a great distance. We know that some of the people, a lot of the people who've been killed have been killed at a considerable distance from these methodical snipers. What's been your experience? Is the killing usually at a great distance, or is it much closer between the victim and the killer?
Yeah, I have been like for many demonstrations at the Great Return March, and I have seen how like the Israeli snipers, at least they are away for 200 meters from the people, and they are in a fortified military towers, so you can't see them. You only feel feel the bullet in the leg and or in the heart of the administration. So they don't pose any threat, and you can't see people. I was looking every Friday. I went there. I was looking. I see there is like a tent of soldiers, but you can't see the snipers. And sometimes the snipers are behind, like on the fence itself. There is snipers, but behind there is soldiers. But behind in a military tower, a closed tower, there is supposedly there is snipers who are killing people.
Abdulrahman, before we look forward, I would like to just look back a moment or two. I was only in Rafah on one occasion when Palestinians blew a big hole in the wall between Egyptian Rafah and Gaza Rafah. I got in for a week or so. But before going, I did a little bit of research, and I was quite horrified to read something from the Bint Jubail fantastic website by an American journalist called Chris Hedges. And Chris Hedges won a Pulitzer Prize. He's a very highly renowned American journalist. And he came to Gaza and he wrote a thing called Gaza Diary, which is on the Bint Jubail website. And he describes how in Rafah, he said he has been all over the world. He's a war correspondent, so he has seen massacres in Algeria, in Guatemala, and many, many places. But he said that the only place, he said Rafah was special when the Israelis were on the checkpoints there, because he said that was the only place in the world he ever saw children, he said, killed for sport. Because he said the Israeli soldiers would taunt, would shout through the PA system at everybody, disgusting things about your mother, your sister, and so on. And when the young boys came, the children came and threw stones from a great distance at a fortress. There was no danger to anybody. He said they would be killed by soldiers because the soldiers were bored. And he also said in his report that sometimes the soldiers used silencers on their rifles. Does that seem true to you? Do you know about this history as well, as I'm sure you must, Abdulrahman? Would you like to comment on that?
Yes, I agree. I fully agree. And this was clear on one of the footage leaked by Israeli soldiers, which we have seen in Israeli media, when they were like during the Great March Return last year, we discussed, I want to shoot this guy or this guy, and they were like cursing them. So it's just for fun. They are killing people, and it was clear when they killed like journalists and paramedics, killing them with who both no threat. Also, it's not only during this march. In Israeli airstrikes, ongoing airstrikes, they are bombing homes and schools, for not just for fun or just for terrifying people, and employing what they call Dahya doctrine, to kill and to make the people to give in.
Perhaps I can add, just you may not know this, but it's important for people in Britain to know that not only are the Israeli soldiers killing large numbers of Palestinians, but they killed a couple of British citizens in Gaza within a week of each other, I think. One was Tom Herndal, who's quite well known, but the other one was a journalist called James Miller. And the interesting thing was they were both killed by snipers. Tom Herndal, when he was trying to protect Palestinian schoolgirls from the sniper. I can't remember the year, but it's quite a few years ago. And the other one was James Miller, a journalist, a cameraman, well known. He was killed by a sniper. And it's interesting that two British juries in Britain, when somebody's killed like this, there's an inquest. And both of the inquest juries, within a week of each other, found that the Israeli army had murdered these British citizens. But the British government didn't do anything about it. And in fact, they continue to send weapons. Perhaps we could move on then, Abdulrahman, because I know you said that despite all the crimes, Western governments are doing nothing. But it's worse than that, isn't it? Because since the massacre of 2014, the British government has multiplied its arms sales 1,000%, by a factor of 10 to the Israelis. And that includes and it's terrible to say this, that still includes parts for sniper rifles. So while I'm talking to you and your friends and your acquaintances are being murdered by Israeli snipers, I'm speaking to you from Britain, and my government is sending the sniper rifle parts to the people who are doing the killing. So I think that's a pretty good start for you to give a message to people in Britain, yeah? What do we need to do, given the solidarity between Netanyahu and my government, given the axis of evil between London and Tel Aviv? What can we do? Because we have to do something. Doing nothing is not an option, is it?
Yes, I agree, fully agree. Yeah, and even just feeling sorry will not stop the massacre in Gaza. That's what we are asking, especially during the Great March there, and we renew our call for full comprehensive military embargo on Israel, stopping selling and exporting weapons or any technology used for weapons with Israel. And this was clear how during the Great March at the end, Israel was fielding its weapons against Gaza. The first time we have seen a drone throwing tear gas was on the first Friday of the Great March at the end. And this is what we call upon people in Britain and Scotland and everywhere around the world to keep pressure and exert more pressure on governments and companies to end any military trade with Israel, because this will enable Israel to commit more crimes and crimes against humanity. And this we should build on the call and the decision by Labour Party last year to stop military embargo again, to stop military sales to Israel. And also we have to remind the Scottish government of its 2014 decision to stop selling arms to Israel. It should be like reinstated very well and very clearly, because we have seen now Israel is not only benefiting from its military aid from like United States, which is amount to $38 billion, and with Britain and with Europe, but also it's selling arms to oppressive regimes and far-right regimes in Brazil and in India, like the government of Modi and Bolsonaro, who is now the Trump in Latin America, and now he's visiting Tel Aviv. And also, Israel is enabling, is fielding its weapons in Gaza and also exporting it to create fortress Europe against immigrants, against minorities and other people. So I take this a chance to send our greetings and gratitude to every activist in Britain, Scotland, and elsewhere who are making campaigns against companies and against governments for military embargo on Israel.
You know, sometimes, perhaps you'll disagree with me, Abdulrahman, but sometimes I get annoyed with Palestinians when they say thank you or they give their gratitude. I don't think we deserve the gratitude. I think this is a duty. It's an imperative that we do something. If we don't do something, then we're not clean. In order for us to stay clean underneath this government, then it's imperative that we do something. And we don't need you to say thank you. That's my humble opinion. Yeah, I think we have to say we are in awe of your resistance, of your refusal to be defeated. And you know, I'm not a fan of Hamas, and I'm not a fan of any particular Palestinian party, but you know, Hamas won the election many years ago, and it's after Palestinians voted in a way that the British and the Americans did not approve of. They didn't go to the Saudi government to say, we think you should have elections, but they punished the people of Gaza for voting and voting in free elections in a way that Britain and Washington did not approve of. Now, if I was in Palestine, I'd be supporting another party. I'd be exercising my right as a Palestinian to fight politically. But I would start off by saying this is a terrible crime against democracy, against people who voted, and it's a violation of there's so many violations of your rights, but this is a fundamental violation of your rights to vote and choose a government, which you choose, and then you can fight it as you wish, right? You can oppose it as you wish. But I think in Britain, we have a duty to say Britain has always been part of the problem in the Middle East, since Balfour, since Sykes-Picot, and everything Britain touches in the Middle East seems to be dirty, from Riyadh to Abu Dhabi to Tripoli and Gaza. So please don't say thank you. Do you agree?
Okay, I agree that you are doing your duty, but even if friends feel good, we feel great when we have friends supporting us, and I know we are comrades in a struggle against not only Israeli apartheid but also racism and all other issues around the world. We are fighting for justice and for a better world.
I have a question for you here. No, before I come to the question, it's a good question. But before I come to it, what's the real aims of the BDS campaign? Look, there's a lot of people who say they support Palestine. I'm never sure what that means, actually, but they don't support BDS, or they never speak about BDS, but they claim to be very strongly in support of Palestine. We just had a letter by very prominent people in Scottish politics who called for many things. They called to recognize the state of Palestine, but they're absolutely determined not to call for BDS. What do you think about solidarity with the Palestinian people, which refuses to engage with the appeal from Palestine for BDS? Can you comment on that, Abdulrahman?
Yeah, good question. Well, if you support Palestine and Palestinian people, then you should heed what Palestinian people are asking for, and this is what BDS. BDS is a Palestinian civil society call from the vast majority of Palestinian civil society inside Palestine and in diaspora outside Palestine. It was launched in 2005, and it calls for boycott and divestment and sanctions for Palestinian rights till Israel complies with international law and that Palestinian rights. The aim of Gaza, this means that Israel should heed and recognize at least 3 rights, which are the minimum for our people to exercise our right to self-determination, which is ending the occupation of Palestinian and Arab lands occupied in 1967 and dismantling the apartheid wall and the Israeli colonies. Second, ending the racial discrimination and apartheid against the Palestinian citizens of Israel, which was approved by the ISQA report of Richard Falk that this is an apartheid. Third, allowing, recognizing, and respecting and protecting the rights of all Palestinian refugees to return to their homes and villages ethnically cleansed from in 1948, and which is a UN-sanctioned right by the UN General Assembly Right Resolution 1994. And also, people who are afraid, who are caving into the Israeli propaganda about BDS, they are wrong, 100%, because BDS is inherited and anchored in the UN, on the human rights law and international law, and we are calling for our rights. And also, Amnesty International and respectful figures recognizing this tool as a legitimate and peaceful tool of resisting the Israeli occupation and apartheid, and also a tool for making solidarity with Palestinian people. And also, all people can engage in this movement in different degrees regarding their context, because BDS movement is also a movement against all forms of racism, xenophobia, sexism, all other forms. And now we are proud that it is joined by great Jewish progressive groups, including the Jewish Voice for Peace in America. So people, if they want to support Palestine, supporting Palestine by just speaking will not stop the imprisonment of Palestinians and killing Palestinians. They should engage in BDS to make an end to this injustice in Palestine.
Okay, so is the main aim of BDS to damage Israel economically, as we did with apartheid South Africa, or is it to send a message to people under Israeli bombs and shells and being imprisoned to boost morale, to say Israel can put a wall around you, but internationally, Israel is in a ghetto. Israel is very, very unpopular. And the BDS movement sends a message to Palestinians. They're not alone. And a message to Israelis, you will not be able to continue like this indefinitely because the world is beginning to move against the Zionist project. Is there a balance, or are these two things simply two different aims of the BDS movement, or is there anything else that I'm missing, Abdulrahman?
Well, you have summed it up very clearly. It has this is a balance and two aims. Well, isolating the Israeli regime of apartheid, colonialism, and occupation till it complies with international law, and also sending a clear message to Palestinians that you are not alone and you have brothers and sisters who are fighting for you and supporting you around the world, are not allowing Israel to enjoy its impunity. And the end message that Israel will be held accountable. And this is what we said it, paraphrasing our late Palestinian poet Mahmoud Darwish, who said, "Besiege your siege." Why BDS? We Palestinians and you, our friends around the world, we are besieging Israel around the world, and any company complicit in Israeli violations of international law.
The pushback against BDS, because BDS has been so successful. We remember, was it last year, the report jointly by the ADL in the USA and the Reut Institute, two pro-Israeli groups. They published a report saying, hey, we're losing. BDS is getting stronger. We're spending millions, but it's not holding things back. The pushback against that is not that people go to the Scottish government or the UK government and say, we love Israel, Israel's a democracy, it's beautiful, Palestinians are terrorists. That's finished, that's old. Right? What they do is they say, hey, BDS makes Jews feel uncomfortable. We are not here because we love Israel, we are here as Scottish Jews or French Jews or Lithuanian Jews. Please stop BDS because it's an attack on us. And it seems to me in that situation, the Palestinian voice is critical for Palestinian communities in Europe. We have many fine people. I'm always in awe of the young Palestinians now in America and what they're managing to achieve by campaigning for BDS. But it seems to me that Palestinian voice speaking about we need to tell our story, and these attacks on free speech are attacks on us talking about what we know, what we live, what we were told by our parents about 1948 and 1967 and 2 years ago and yesterday. So it seems to me that the Palestinian voice would be fantastically powerful if we have groups speaking as Palestinians, obviously as part of the wider solidarity and BDS movement, but the Palestinian voice coming forward to say, this is who we are, we have a history, and you cannot stop us speaking about our lived experience. What do you think?
Well, and two things. I think your comment was about two things about people who are making this a case against Jews and other Palestinian voices. Well, the BDS is targeting the Israeli system of occupation and institutions. It's not targeting people based on their religion or ethnicity. It's targeting Israel because of its crimes and its denial of our rights since the last century. It's not about Jews. We have Jewish people who are engaged in the BDS movement, as I have mentioned, Jewish Voice for Peace, and great figures like Judith Butler, Ilan Pappé, Ronnie Castles, and others. And also, this norm with this Israeli propaganda in itself is anti-Semitic. When Israel is trying to portray itself as a representative of Jews all over the world, this in itself is anti-Semitic because it tries to describe people as all Jewish as a monolithic group, which is totally wrong, and we are against all forms of racism. And this a fight for justice and equality and freedom in Palestine. Second point, yes, I see, and Palestinian voices are speaking about the Israeli cause and the crimes against our rights and our people. And I see many friends, students who are studying now in Europe and in Britain are speaking about our rights and our story to people in their campus, and this is very vital. And also, one impediment to this is how mainstream media is hiding the Palestinian voices, and they are discussing, when you have seen like mainstream media in Europe and in America, they are discussing the Palestinian issue without Palestinians, and they are bringing sometimes far right, xenophobic people, racist people speaking about Palestine. So what was the aim now, and what is the tool now, which is good for Palestinian voices to be here, is through social media and through alternative media, free media, and through solidarity group. So our work should like giving more spaces to Palestinian voices to be heard and to be spoken, because mainstream media rarely allow Palestinian voices to be listened to and viewed.
Okay, I've got some questions here for you, Abdulrahman, from viewers. I mean, one is basically, let me read. The question is, what's more urgent in terms of boycott? Cultural, economical, sports, academic? Are they all equally important? I guess to sharpen the question, if we had limited resources and we said to you, hey, do you have any priorities? Would you be able to answer, or just say, do whatever you can?
Well, first, all sorts of boycott are important and vital. But now the most urgent campaign is military embargo against Israel, because Israel is killing Palestinians everywhere in West Bank, in Jerusalem, in Gaza. But we are sensitive to the context and the ability and the resources of every campaign and activists around the world. So if in your country or in your city you are able to make a campaign, a cultural boycott campaign, not a military embargo campaign, or a sports campaign, not academic boycott, then go on. Because now we have seen Israel is using many arenas to whitewash its crimes against humanity. For example, now we have the Eurovision, which will be held in Tel Aviv in May, which is the anniversary of the Nakba. So if you are able to raise awareness about artists not to go to Eurovision, it will be great. If you are able to push your university to cut ties with your university, then go. Any campaign regarding this, under the umbrella of BDS, will make a step towards freedom, justice, and equality in Pakistan.
I mean, I would only add to that before asking the next question that clearly the pro-Israel crowd go crazy when there's a successful cultural boycott. I'm old enough to have been somebody who invaded rugby pitches against apartheid South Africa, and they hated it. Well, the fans wanted to kill us as well, but hey, we had a message to send to South Africa. But cultural boycott seems to have the same effect on Israelis. I mean, we notched up a few successes in Scotland. One of them in 2009, and if people are bored by this story, I apologize, but I never get bored. In 2009, we managed to force the Edinburgh International Film Festival to return money to the Israeli embassy. Dirty money, sponsorship money to a dirty embassy. And they went crazy. But we later discovered through leaked emails from Hillary Clinton that there was a big commotion and that some serious multimillionaires, more millions than I've got fingers or hands and toes, lots of money, they lobbied the American government to intervene to stop a small campaign happening in Edinburgh. So they think what we think is very small and very modest, they think is very serious because it can spread, it can be an example, and they get really worried. So here's the second question is, it's not directly about boycott, but it's how we build the boycott, of course. Somebody says, forgive me who asked the question because it's forwarded to me by our producer here. Telling individual stories about Palestinian experiences can be useful when explaining the situation to people who don't know enough, who are new to the issue. But how can we tell these individual stories while, of course, respecting it as a collective national struggle? Would you like to respond to that, Abdulrahman? What's the value of telling individual stories, and what's the limitations of it?
Well, individual stories are part of the collective story, and individual stories help us to humanize the story and the narrative of the Palestinian people. People are not numbers. So when some people are like having the media and the reports are telling like 200 people are killed, 1,000 people are killed, Palestinians are not statistics. So when we tell the story of each martyr, each prisoner, each injured people, it will make people to understand and feel the pain of the Palestinian people, and then engage in BDS movement. This is like sometimes the play of the media. They like just make it numbers and not telling the stories of the Palestinians. And it's not when an individual Palestinian is speaking about his oral misery. It's part of the whole tragedy, and it's not about oneself. It's about the whole people.
You know, I never met a Palestinian who didn't have a story, which, if it happened to me or lots of other people, you would think this should be a film, this should be a Hollywood miniseries. This is dramatic. This is amazing. I'm sure other people viewing have similar experiences of traveling in a taxi in Palestine, and if you ask the driver and you press, he might tell you he was 5 years in prison or 7 years, or his brother was 22 years in prison. It's incredible, the stories that you hear. And it seems to be something which Palestinians live and experience, which is quite unusual, rare, unique in the world in terms of the degree of oppression and imprisonment and so on. What do you think about? I mean, I'm just humbled. I'm just humbled when I talk to people like that. Yeah, I mean, I've been in prison for a few days, and I think I'm a hero. Yeah, a few days, but I speak to people who spent more years in prison than I have spent days, and I just, I don't know why people are not more broken. How they find the resources to resist strikes me as absolutely remarkable. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. We have like in every corner of Palestine, you are seeing a story of a human heroic, and also under horror and under Israeli violations. Now, this month, almost five Palestinian prisoners, they have spent till now 34 years in Israeli prison. One of them, Karim Yunus, who is Israeli citizen, who is Palestinian citizen of Israel. So imagine when one spends almost until now ongoing 4 decades in a cell.
And Nelson Mandela spent 27, but Karim Yunus is now on 34. Yeah.
Yeah, and also for other people like him, and also people spent 20s and 30s, people, and when you see people in Gaza. And this is just to mention how individual stories and like collective stories. Gaza now is United Nations said in a report a few years ago that Gaza will be unfit for living in 2022. But now already Gaza is uninhabitable area, when almost 98% of water is polluted and unfit for human use. When the high rate of poverty and unemployment and diseases and electricity cuts and siege and Israeli violations, and this you are seeing people protesting every weekend along the fence against a full fortified armed to seize Israeli soldiers and snipers.
Well, that question wasn't planted about the relationship between individuals and the collective, but it does bring me to something else, that we actually have a couple of meetings on a week today in Edinburgh at 2 o'clock, and the following night in Glasgow. A woman called Khulud Ajarmi from Ida Camp, where she lives at the moment, but she's really from Ajur village, and Ajur village is now officially by the Israelis called the British Park. And there's a horrible sign in the front of the village, of the park. I've been there many times. And if you can see the ruins of the Palestinian villages, Ajur and another one. But Khulud is coming to speak about her particular family. And of course, she's using her family experience of being driven out of the Nakba and of living in a refugee camp since then, to tell the story of the Palestinian people. But more importantly, to tell that story and to say the organization which is key in violating her rights is called the JNF, the Jewish National Fund. Do you want to comment at all on the Jewish National Fund, Abdulrahman?
Yeah, this is an important goal of one of the BDS, for one of the campaigns of the BDS movement against Jewish National Fund. It is a key part in the Israeli colonization of Palestine and ethnic cleansing of Palestinian people. And it owns almost more than 95% of our land in Palestine. And it's getting lands for Jews only and getting the lands of Palestinians. And therefore, this organization, which has a charity status in many countries, including Britain, should come to an end. And we have to make a pressure more and more against this national fund to be held accountable, and in any relations and any privileges it has in Britain, in Scotland, and elsewhere.
I hope. Well, I'm not sure everybody knows that two of the honorary patrons of the JNF in the UK, one of them is a creature called Tony Blair, and that tells you very quickly there's something very dirty about the JNF when Tony Blair is a patron. And if you're in any doubt after that, one other patron is Gordon Brown. So these two urge support for the JNF, but it is, as Abdulrahman says, a pillar of Israeli apartheid. By the way, the JNF threatened to sue Scottish PSC. They threatened big, powerful lawyers, money that we couldn't possibly match. They threatened to take us to court because we said they were active in the ethnic cleansing of Palestine. And we said, fantastic, see you in court. And they backed off. They just went silent. We said, please come to court. What we said, we will repeat. What we said, we will continue to repeat. You know it's true. You should be in prison. Don't sue us. And they backed off because they know they're dirty, but they think they can intimidate people into silence. So that's next Sunday in Edinburgh at 2 p.m. in the Grassmarket Centre. Khulud Ajarmi speaking about her personal family history as a microcosm of the Palestinian national tragedy and struggle. But she'll be asking people not just to sympathize, but to join her by putting pressure on the JNF in Scotland. And I think we have given the JNF in Scotland a very, very hard time over the years. They no longer have open fundraisers. They always have them in secret because people now know that they're very dirty indeed. They were driven out of a golf club they used to use, another facility they used without any sense of shame. They had a shooting thing every year for fundraising. That's been cancelled as well. So we have to intensify the pressure given the situation in Palestine. So Sunday in Edinburgh, 2 o'clock in the Grassmarket Centre, 7 o'clock on Monday night in Glasgow in the Renfield Centre. And you just look at the Facebook pages for further detail. Abdulrahman, can I ask you a couple of more questions? One's a personal question. I mean, I just posted 2 photographs, one of Gaza, which looks like Hiroshima, and another one of the horror of Palestinian rockets falling on Israelis. And it shows a guy in his house looking at a damaged ceiling inside his house. And apparently his family were very slightly injured. Do you ever feel anger at the racism that values Israeli Zionist blood and has no value on Palestinian blood. One you can measure in small amounts, the other one in swimming pools in vast amounts. Do you have any personal feelings of anger about that?
Well, this is the bias of Zionist state and also supporter of Israel, that neglecting the real cause of the violence and the start of the violence and the siege and the occupation, and then concentrating on the response of the occupied people. If people are feeling sorry about anything happening in Israeli settlements, then they should join the BDS campaign and join the struggle to end the real cause of the violence. The real cause of the problem is the colonizer, not the colonized. So the occupation of Palestine since 1948 and the siege of Gaza since for then 12, 13 years, and the preventing of Palestinians to return their homes, this is the real problem. People who are claiming to be humanitarian and humane and feeling sorry, then they should look about how millions of Palestinians and tens of thousands of Palestinians are killed and injured on daily basis on televisions and in broad daylight.
A couple more questions for you, Abdulrahman, if I can keep you for a bit longer. Is that okay?
Okay.
Yeah. One question is, can you describe the atmosphere at the Great March of Return demonstrations? The heroism seems to me just off the scale. People putting themselves in front of snipers whom they know killed 62 people to celebrate the opening of the American embassy in Al-Quds in Jerusalem. But facing live fire like this with only your bodies is quite remarkable. Gandhi used to lead large demonstrations in India, salt demonstrations, and they got clubbed and beaten by British soldiers, sorry. And that was heroism. But this is something else. Can you describe that atmosphere? Because it's something we find impossible to really feel and understand. It's heroism to an incredible degree.
Well, you are right. Language, I think, doesn't have words to describe this heroism and this bravery of my people in Gaza and elsewhere in West Bank and Jerusalem, and elsewhere in Palestine. But when the colonizer Israel pushing Palestinians to the end of life and putting them on diet to keep them on the brink of death, and all governments, including Western governments, are watching us without any steps to stop these violations, people we have two options: either to give in our rights, which is impossible, or to fight till the end for our rights. However, if we have Israeli snipers, Israeli tanks, but we have no options but to fight for our rights, and this is like in itself is a defeat for the Israeli system of regime and apartheid. Israel was dreaming that the young generation will forget their cause, will forget the villages which we haven't visited yet, and we haven't lived in it. But now you have seen Palestinian children know very well where their village is, which is behind the fence, and they want to cross for it. And but what is important, people, including especially the people of conscience, should not stay lazy and watching this bravery and heroism. This is why we should get more action of BDS against Israel to stop this massacre, because each human life is important for us. We can't keep losing the lives of Palestinians, because we have seen, like, now I quote one of the reports of by Medical Aid for Palestine and Médecins Sans Frontières, when they said, like, the Israeli bullet was turning the bones of Palestinians into ashes. This horror means that we are in need of urgent action to isolate Israel. But to conclude, this is not a miracle. This is like how any people losing their rights and their land will fight till the end, till freedom, justice, and equality.
Abdulrahman, Linda Jones posts to say thank you. It's uppercase YOU. Thank you! Exclamation mark. Thanks for speaking here, and thanks for your continued resistance. Another exclamation mark. I'd like you to wind up with 2 points if you could respond to them. One, I asked you earlier and you answered very clearly about people who claim to support Palestine, or in their own way they do, but they refuse to embrace BDS. The other thing is that when our campaign started in the year 2000, we immediately said end the occupation, and the right of refugees to return. And some people said, look, we support Palestine, but leave the refugee issue alone. It's too hot. You won't be popular. Governments don't like it. Best to be a little bit respectable and call for an end to the occupation of the lands conquered in '67. We said no. The right